Hello and welcome to another video. My name is CJ the Populist New Yorker, and today we're going to be looking at the key takeaways and the aftermath of the 2020 election, since all of these states have been officially called as of yesterday. So the states of Georgia and Arizona have finally been called after nearly 2 weeks of being up in the air. So we're going to be analyzing mostly the national election, but we'll also look briefly at the Senate and House results. But first, we're going to look at the presidential result in particular. So, of course, this was the 2020 election. Donald Trump won with 306 electoral votes. He ended up getting 304 due to faithless electors. And Hillary Clinton got 232 officially. She ended up getting 227, again, due to faithless electors. So it wasn't that exact number. But essentially, we're looking at a mirror image of the election of 2016. The states, of course, that flipped from last time, from Democrat to Republican, were Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida. So in the 2016 election, we had 6 states flip into the Republican category. In 2020, we had 5 states flip into the Democratic category. The 3 states that... 6 states. I made a mistake there for a second. The 2 states that were somewhat historic flips were, of course, the state of Arizona and the state of Georgia. Neither candidate has gone to a Democrat since the 1990s. Arizona last went to a Democrat in 1996 with Bill Clinton, and, of course, Georgia in 1992 with Bill Clinton. So this was the last time these Sunbelt states were carried. But the fact they flipped shows huge implications for the future electoral map. Really putting Arizona and Georgia in the complete toss-up category. Both states were won by Biden, as it looks right now, by 0.3 percentage, which is a razor-thin margin. Biden only winning by a handful of 1,000 votes or so, a couple thousand votes in the state of Georgia. The biggest shifts in the state occurred here in the metro area. Now, not all the counties are fully in, so we're not going to get the exact map. But the trends from 2016 are super stark. All of these counties moving heavily to the left. Cobb County, which is a very populous county, I think it has around 900,000 people in it, moved 12 points more Democratic. Gwinnett County, 12 points more Democratic. We can even look at the 2016 result. Trump won this state by 5.1 percentage points. In 2020, Biden won it by 0.3%. And the interesting thing is, if we look at the trends from 2012, we could see a similar dramatic shift in the suburbs of Atlanta. And this is the area of the state that is growing. The rest of the state isn't really growing at the same rate as the Atlanta metro area. Savannah, I think, is kind of growing, but at a much slower area. But this is where all the population growth is in North Georgia. And even these very, very heavily red counties up north got a little bluer. And these were counties that trended red in 2016. They trended a bit back in favor of the Democrats. So another thing is Georgia is no longer a lean red state or even a tilt red state. I'd say it's a pure toss-up at this point, and possibly in the future will be just a blue state similar to a Virginia or Colorado. In order for Republicans to keep the state, it's going to be I think an uphill battle in the future demographically, as these suburbs are getting a lot more diverse. They're not really working class. These are upper working class, middle class suburbs now, which is moving in the direction of Democrats. Suburbs in general are moving in the direction of Democrats. There's less white voters in these suburbs than there were 20 years ago. That's a group that favors Democrats a lot. So all of the political and demographic wins in Georgia are favoring Democrats. Arizona, likewise. The only area in Arizona that's really growing at an insane rate is, of course, the Phoenix area. And this was an area that trended 5 points in favor of the Democrats. But keep in mind, around 70% of the state's population, it might be 60 or 70% of the state's population, voting population, lives in Maricopa County. So as Maricopa County goes, usually so goes the state. This was a county that Kyrsten Sinema won in 2018 by a few points, and she ended up winning the state of Arizona by 2.7%. And this was a county that Biden won by 2.2%, and he carried the margin, the state, by 0.3%. And that's probably due to the part that Trump actually improved in some of the rural counties out in the rest of Arizona, but it wasn't enough to secure him a victory in the state. He was increasing his margin recently. And then they called it when it was no longer mathematically possible for Trump to win there. But the biggest takeaways, even if Georgia and Arizona had flipped, the Rust Belt was really what killed the Trump presidency. Of course, we look at Pennsylvania. As of right now, Pennsylvania, Joe Biden is up by around a point. He's probably likely to get over 50% by the end. He'll probably win Pennsylvania by 1.2 or 1.3% when it's all said and done. Again, I don't know when all of the ballots need to be in and counted, but, it's really is a slow rollout. We've been watching these results for weeks now. But again, of course, the state of Pennsylvania trending much more Democratic. And ironically enough, Philadelphia, where a lot of the voting and ballot and polling drama was happening, actually trended slightly more Republican than it was in 2016. And of course, in 2016, Philadelphia trended more red than it was in 2012. So that totally means Philadelphia is becoming a red city. Obviously not, though. It means it's trending slightly more Republican. But nearly every county in the state of Pennsylvania, minus a few really rural counties, trended more Democratic, particularly here in northeastern PA, which is how Trump won the state last time. He ran up the margins here in western Pennsylvania, which is a huge vote basket, and he did really well in northeastern PA. He won Northampton County. He won Luzerne County, which was a flip. And he won Erie County. These are all counties that he lost now. And the Erie County margin, Biden is up by a point now. This is basically exactly what... This is identical to the statewide margin, really, at this point. So, and similarly in 2016 it was as well. Not that Erie has a lot of people, it just seems to be a really good bellwether for the state. But Trump really underperformed in areas like Pittsburgh. If we go back to 2016... Pittsburgh trended more Democratic. It's basically Trump hasn't really improved his margin at all. In fact, Joe Biden just did better than Hillary Clinton by a good amount, and that pushed up his statewide margin significantly. Of Philadelphia losing Chester County by 17 points in 2016. He only lost it by 9 points, so almost doubling his margin of loss there. Of course, Montgomery County, another county he did even worse in. Bucks County, same thing. Bucks County was within a point last time. This time around, Biden has won it by around 3, so fairly comfortably. And again, same story in the state of Michigan. The suburban counties, Trump did a lot worse in around suburban Detroit, and even in some rural counties too. Antrim County, which was a lot redder in 2016. So even all over the state, Trump was just underperforming, and that combined led to Joe Biden winning his largest margin of victory in a Rust Belt state this cycle, 50-47. Now, if we look at the 2016 result, interestingly enough, Trump only got exactly 47.3% of the vote, so he technically improved on his margin percentage of the total vote. It's just that Joe Biden did a whole lot better. So Michigan was still really close. This is definitely a state that is going to be in play in the future. Same with Pennsylvania, same with Wisconsin. These states are not really going to trend more blue or more red anytime soon. I think they're going to stay bright purple. Same with Wisconsin. And what killed Trump in Wisconsin, of course, was the WOW counties. These are counties that are traditionally Republican strongholds, and as we're about to see, they trended heavily Democratic. 6 points in favor of Biden, 7 points in favor of Biden, 2 points in favor of Biden. These numbers add up considering so many people live in the WOW counties, and even Milwaukee County itself trended 3 points more Democratic. Green Bay trended nearly 4 points more Democratic, and all of these numbers added up together. So Trump really underperformed in suburban areas specifically and urban areas, but even in rural areas, Trump underperformed and, Biden did slightly better. And I think that just goes to show you that Hillary really was just a weaker candidate than Joe Biden in hindsight. She wasn't able to win over rural working class voters the way Joe Biden was. Now, Joe Biden did not win these voters by any stretch of the imagination in a lot of these counties. In fact, a lot of these southwestern swing counties, a lot of them are still red. I think a few of them are blue. But nearly half of them are still red, so we're still seeing the urban-rural divide in a place like Wisconsin, but the margins were run up in the suburbs enough so that Joe Biden could win the state by 0.6%. It was actually a narrower margin than Trump won it, but now he's up 20,000 votes in the state. So now we're going to look at some exit polls for the election, some national exit polls. In 2016, when Trump only lost the popular vote by around 2 points or so. He was at 53% with men, 41% with women. Of course, keep in mind that there was a larger third-party percentage in 2016 than we see in 2020. Oh, we're down a bit. In the 2020 election, Trump only won men by 7 points. In 2016, he won them by 12. So already a huge difference, cutting his margins among men in half at this point. White voters 58-37 in 2016. Now, white voters only winning them by 17 points compared to nearly 20 points. So he actually didn't do that much worse with white voters than I thought he was going to do, but Biden did about better. Trump's margin at 58% stayed relatively the same, but Biden increased. Black voters, 88% for Biden, 8% for Trump. Trump actually improved with black voters. He got 12%, which is what I predicted he would get, which is really interesting. Among Latino voters, Trump also improved 32 to Biden's 65 if we go back. 29 to 65. So Trump actually overperformed. Biden did about the same as Hillary. But of course, in key swing states like Texas and Florida, which we're going to look at later in the video, these are areas where the Hispanic community actually moved the state more to the right, particularly in Florida. Texas, it kind of kept things the same because the urban areas were trending drastically more Democratic. But what kind of kept the state from swinging too far to the left was the massive swings in the Rio Grande, and we'll get a little bit more in detail about that in a second. Even Asian voters, 34% to 61%. That's a huge improvement on 65 to 29, and we could see that pan out in a state like Hawaii, which has the largest Asian population per capita of any state. Trump got 34% of the vote in Hawaii. Biden got 63. If we look at the 2016 election, Trump only got 30% of the vote in Hawaii. Hillary 62. So Biden did a little bit better than Hillary, but Trump improved +4 on his 2016 margin. Now, I don't know if that is going to hold among Asian voters. Again, Hawaii is literally the bluest state in the country. Yeah, I think so. Tied with Vermont, I guess, but Vermont has a Republican governor, so I guess you could say Hawaii really is the bluest state in the country right now. And Trump chipped away at some Democratic margins there. 98% reporting. This number really isn't going to change. Again, we could look more at age bracket is not so much. The main thing I want to look at is ideology, because this is where a huge shift happened. Do they have military on here? They do not. So, military service. Interesting. So in 2016, Trump won 61% of those with a military background. Hillary just 34. If we go to 2020, Trump only won vets by 10 points. So that's a dramatic drop in favor of the Democrats for Trump. And of course, the no vote, that doesn't really matter too much. That doesn't really change. But the military vote trended heavily in Biden's direction, which is, I guess, good news for Democrats going into the future. The largest shift by far, though, is here, those who describe themselves as moderates. So 38% of Americans, according to this exit poll, consider themselves conservatives. The same number moderates. Liberal, just 24%. This is an important group because this is where Trump really lost the 2020 election. It was among moderates. Biden won moderates by 30 points in 2020. If we just go back to 2016, that number in 2016, Hillary Clinton only won moderates by 11. So a massive, massive, massive shift. Conservative voters, 81 to 15. Trump actually improved with self-described conservatives, winning 85% of them, but it was not nearly enough. Trump won 10% of liberals somehow. And he got 10% last time. So Biden he did better with liberal voters. He did much better with moderates. And that's really where the election was decided. And again, if this exit poll has anything to say, there were more Republicans that voted for Biden than Democrats for Trump. It's not a significant number, but a point nationally does really mean something. And those who describe themselves as independent, Biden won independents by 13 points. If we go back to party affiliation, in 2016, Trump won those independents by 6 points. So a massive, massive shift in a lot of areas. Now we're going to look at particularly the Hispanic demographic in the 2020 election, because I think it was very quintessential in deciding the outcomes in two states, Florida and Texas. First, we'll look at Florida. The biggest shock of the night for me personally was how close Miami-Dade County was. Biden only won Miami-Dade County by 7.3%. To put that in perspective, Hillary Clinton won Miami-Dade County by 30 points in the 2016 election. So we're talking one of the most dramatic shifts to the right of any county in the country. And Miami-Dade has a huge Hispanic population, particularly Cubans. And we see some shifts to the left as well. Jacksonville went blue for the first time presidentially in a very long time. And that's just goes to show you that, urban counties are just moving more away from the Republican Party, at least in the 2020 election. Rural areas are getting more red. So this is a huge shift, and this was also mirrored in other areas with larger Cuban populations. Trump in Florida, I don't have the exit poll up here, but he got, I think, 46% of the Hispanic vote in Florida, which isn't even close to what he got in 2016. It was like 38 or something. So that offset the gains that Biden made with white seniors in probably the Tampa area, around Orlando, and probably in Jacksonville and areas like that. So that offset any areas where he lost with boomers and then some, because the shift among Hispanics was so stark. Biden winning Palm Beach only by 13 points. Miami-Dade, the most populous county in Florida, that's incredible. The fact that it was just so close. So if that were to continue, the state of Florida would definitely be, I guess, the new Georgia in terms of a state that Republicans can sort of rely on to be in their category in future elections. But again, this is just one election. If Florida trends more to the right in 2024, then I would definitely say this is a big state, like a Texas, a California, New York, that Republicans can actually rely on again. Now, the other big state Republicans used to be able to rely on was the state of Texas. They still won it, but now the margin is only 5.7%. On election night, it was around 6 points. Now, of course, if we look at the shifts from 2016, we could see some dramatic shifts going on in here. Areas, counties that are majority Latino, trended heavily to the right. Starr County, 55 points more Republican. Although, keep in mind, hardly anybody lives in this county, but it was exemplified enough in other areas like Cameron County, Hidalgo County, which is where Laredo, Texas is, where the margins were large enough for Republicans, 40%, 42%, for them to really chip away and prevent Biden from doing even better in the state, from getting more of a Beto margin of 48 or even 49%, making the state really close. Other big shifts occurred in Fort Worth, Tarrant County, Biden winning it by 0.2. This was a county that Trump won in 2016 by around 8 points. So a huge shift already. The Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex keeps trending more and more Democrat. It trended Democrat from 2012 to 2016, 2016 to 2020. That's not changing anytime soon. In fact, these counties here that Trump won by nearly 20 points back in 2016, Collin and Denton County, you see the margins are around 20 points or so. This time around, in the 2020 election, Trump only wins these counties by 5 points and 8 points, respectively. So doing dismally in the suburbs, losing Williamson County. This was a county that I don't even think Beto O'Rourke won. I could be wrong. Beto might have won it. But it was very close. Biden actually winning this county by a point. So the Austin suburbs are getting a lot bluer. Houston, not really changing all that much. It got slightly more Democratic, but it's almost insignificant. Biden won by essentially the same margin that Hillary did. Trump actually did a little bit better overall in his percentage. But the biggest takeaways from the 2020 election are the urban and suburban shifts, more to the left, which we've seen in polling, and of course the shift among Hispanic voters was, to say the least, monumentous. Now the last thing we'll look at is the House and Senate races. We'll start with the Senate race. We're not going to be able to call all the House races because not all the results are in, but I didn't want to take forever to make this video. But of course, Susan Collins retained her seat. That was something that surprised me because all of the polling indicated that that was not the case. And in fact, that reminds me of a future video that I'll be making probably sometime this week about the terrible polling in the 2020 election and how it was horrendous at predicting the outcomes in a lot of these states. Trump overperformed his polls massively. They underestimated Republicans, particularly Susan Collins in her race, which was probably the worst, the most egregious polling error. That and maybe along with Iowa's, which I think Biden was leading up until the very end. Of course, Tom Tillis retains his seat against Cal Cunningham. Cunningham wasn't able to withstand that scandal. I actually predicted this race correctly. I had the race tilting to Tillis, and that ended up happening. The Susan Collins race I got wrong, but just about everybody I've seen online has gotten this race wrong, having Sarah Gideon have a slight edge in this race. But Tillis' seat retained. Colorado flipping, everybody saw that coming essentially, and of course Arizona flipping. Everyone saw that coming too. Martha McSally is a two-time loser now in terms of statewide Senate races. Doug Ducey chose her to fill the seat back in 2019, I think, and she was appointed to the Senate, not elected. And the next time voters were able to elect her, they rejected her a second time, which is really remarkable. So Martha McSally will not be a U.S. Senator any longer. She conceded the race a few days ago. And that is really interesting. Also, another race I was actually right about is the New Mexico Senate race. I predicted this race way back when and said this race was going to be within 5 or 6 points. And lo and behold, I was actually correct with this. Now, this seat wasn't that consequential, and it wasn't really going to go to Republicans anyway. But a lot of people had this seat as safe and likely. And maybe in some of my later videos, I kind of ignored my older prediction and had it as safe or likely because I didn't really pay much attention to it. But this was actually a race that got down. This is a lean margin by my scale. Basically likely, I guess, 6 points. But this is a lot closer than you would think from a state like New Mexico. If we just look... And this could be possibly in part due to the shift among Hispanics, but also I pointed out in my New Mexico video, which I will link in the description, that when there's a non-incumbent in a Senate race, it tends to get pretty close, and that's exactly what we saw with Mark Ronchetti versus Ben Ray Lujan. Ben Ray Lujan, this was an open seat, and it ended up being a little bit closer than a lot of people were thinking, and you know, Ronchetti was able to run up the margins in places like Albuquerque, Santa Fe he did better, Las Cruces, and of course in Roswell and these other areas. So he overperformed Trump in essentially every part of the state. Again, not to focus too much on that race because it's not all that important. Again, Iowa was another race that was a lot more lopsided than polls indicated. Joni Ernst won her seat again pretty comfortably compared to what the polls were saying. The polls were saying Greenfield actually could win, and if Joni Ernst won, she'd only win by a point or so, but polls were wrong in Iowa. I think we should have learned from the Iowa caucus in 2016 that all the polls were wrong. Michigan was actually a race that shocked me a little bit. This was a race that was a lot closer than I thought. Gary Peters, at the end of the day, looks like he's only going to win his Senate seat by around 2 points. I had it around 4 or 5. So John James overperformed my expectations. He is a really good candidate, and I think if the Michigan Republicans were smart, they would run him either for governor or some other statewide race because he has the name recognition now, and he could easily win this state in an off-year election. It just happens that both times John James was running, they were Democratic years. 2020 was a Democratic year, Biden carried the state, and 2018 was a Democratic year in the state of Michigan. Finally, we're going to take a quick look at the House races. Not all of these races have been called, especially a lot in my home state of New York. But again, not that consequential. I don't think there's going to be any flips there anyway. But so far, Republicans have flipped 10 seats. People like Nate Silver and other horrible pollsters. I can't stand Nate Silver because he just gets everything wrong. After 2012, he completely fell off. Because I guess the results that he was actually seeing didn't really match what he wanted to pan out, so he wouldn't accurately report them. That's my theory anyway, but Nate Silver said that the Democrats were going to gain and Republicans were going to lose more seats, but that didn't really happen. Democrats only gained 3 seats. They gained Georgia's 7th district, which I said they were going to gain, and of course the 2 North Carolina districts that were ungerrymandered. These were seats that Democrats were guaranteed to flip. But the rest of the flips were Republican flips. We saw 2 flips in the state of California so far, both in and around Orange County. These are districts that flipped in 2018 and went back to Republicans, which is really interesting because if we look on the presidential map real quick, Orange County got a lot bluer than it was in 2016. Joe Biden won it by 9 points. They don't have the trend yet. 0.5 over... Well, I guess Orange County must have been more lopsided than I thought it was. Yeah, it actually was. But Orange County is still a blue county now, and Republicans actually gained in this area, which is impressive and kind of indicates that the Republican Party support is not completely dead in the suburbs. It is still there, and it shows that Republicans can win back support in suburban areas. New Mexico's second. This is a rural Republican district. This was pretty expected. Same with Kendra Horn's seat in Oklahoma's 5th, as well as Joe Cunningham's seat in South Carolina's 1st. Of course, Colin Peterson, this was another flip that was bound to happen. He ended up losing by 13. He's been an incumbent there since the 1990s. Iowa's 1st district has flipped to Republican. It looks like the 2nd is a dead heat right now. I wouldn't be surprised if the Democrat ekes it out, but anything could happen. And of course, Justin Amash's district, Michigan's 3rd, has also flipped. So a decent amount of Republican flips. It actually looks like we're going to get more. We could get one Republican flip in New York's 22nd in upstate New York. So that is definitely something to look out for. But other than that, the only other flips we can really look at are possibly California's 21st. Mike Garcia, that would be a hold for Republicans. And if Burgess Owens wins in Utah, it would actually be a very good election for Republicans in terms of the House. And of course, we can't forget the 2 Miami-Dade districts that flipped red, probably due to Trump being at the top of the ticket, which was crazy because both of these districts, Florida's 27th, if we look back at 2016, not the House. If we look back at 2016, I don't think this race was as close. I was wrong. These were 2 Republican districts in 2016. Republicans won them back in 2020 by around 3 points or so, and I think they'll probably stay in Republican hands. So the final takeaways from the 2020 election thus far is obviously Joe Biden won. He won back the Rust Belt. He turned the state of Georgia blue for the first time since 92, Arizona since 96. Let me just pull up the presidential map for this. Republicans did much better in the House than the pollsters, the pundits expected them to do. And, of course, Republicans were not nearly as bad in the Senate race. But, of course, all of the control of the Senate hinges on the 2 runoffs for the Georgia Senate race. I uploaded a video about that a couple of days ago. Link in the description. You should check it out. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching this video. Please like this video if you enjoyed. Please subscribe this video and share this video with your friends. Get the channel out there. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.